What am I to do?
Welcome to He Said, She Said Razor Branding Podcast with Michael Russo and Jaci Russo. To learn more about how to improve your brand, visit brandRUSSO.com.
Welcome to He Said, She Said Branding with Michael and Jaci Russo. We are so excited to have you here for this episode of the podcast.
It was a good one.
It really was. Erik is with Hy-Tek. You may or may not have heard of them, but his approach to B2B should be like the first 3 chapters of our next book on B2B marketing, because I think his agency experience and his B2C experience, he brings into the B2B world and he nails it.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, we are in the final drafts of our new book.
I know, and I'm very excited about that.
2.0.
Yes. Yes, indeed. And I have been working on draft of 3, which is the greatest hits of all the things we've learned from all of our guests from the podcast. I think that's going to be really good too.
You trying to outdo me?
No, just support and love you through it.
All right. Well, He Said, She Said is kind of a duo book effort.
It is indeed.
I did most of the writing.
As you did on the first one. I don't think anybody questions who does the heavy lifting of the real work around here. We know you're the talent.
You're quoted. You're quoted a lot.
Thanks. And how many of those quotes did I actually make versus you wrote for me?
I know you said them all. Trust me.
Okay.
They're all you. I may have finessed them a little bit.
All right, I'll take it. Okay, back to Erik. This episode is awesome because for the people who really struggle with how to position themselves for B2B, how to take advantage of their trade show opportunities, how to get the subject matter experts on their team to be a part of the content creation, Erik nailed it.
Yeah, and just the understanding of it's a question that we ask a lot, like, what is a brand? And everybody's interpretation of that is different. And everybody's value of it is different. He definitely gets it. And I think that is what's made their marketing successful. And also the challenges they have. Every marketer has these days of developing content, keeping up with trends, keeping up with demand in a very, very noisy world.
Right. No, absolutely. So y'all listen in, and I think you're going to learn something.
When the day is through.
Erik, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. Get to talk marketing and looking forward to it.
Well, I'm looking forward to it too. And it's the talking about marketing thing that I think makes this podcast so valuable for people, because we don't get to have enough of those conversations. We're all so busy and there's so many less opportunities to have genuine marketing to marketing connections. We go to trade shows and conferences and it feels like a sales pitch. We'll go to maybe an AdFed or an AMA meeting, and you never know who's in the room. And maybe it's B2C people, maybe it's a lot of newbies to the industry. So I like this because we're able to talk to people like you who are doing the hard work out there in the field every day. And I think it's a great learning experience. So thanks for joining us.
No, I'm excited to be here. No, I like I said, I love talking to marketers. I love talking about my past, but really I like to talk about storytelling, because really I think that is our primary job, regardless if you're B2B, B2C, it is about the story and how do you connect the dots and create that emotional connection to a customer, which I think in the B2B space is becoming more valuable than it used to be. It is a lot less about the fundamentals of what my product does or what my service does. Is how do I connect to that individual to make that sale?
Erik, I like you already.
Erik, there is not an official Michael's favorite guest category, and it does not come with an award, but I think you just won it because you're saying all the things he says all the time. Good job.
Glad I could accommodate.
I mean, Michael's like, we're done. I don't need anything else from this podcast episode. It's finished. But I actually would like to start a little bit about the beginning. So Erik, kind of talk us through your journey to your current position and how you got to where you are.
Yeah. So today I sit as Vice President of Marketing and Business Development with Hy-Tek Intralogistics. And Hy-Tek Intralogistics is, if you imagine the 4 walls of a warehouse, all of the technology that helps connect a product to a customer, that journey is what we do as an organization. So we're engineering driven with a lot of technology partners. So think robots, think conveyor, think racking. We are the designers, the creatives that make sure that solution is effective and provides that total cost of ownership for a customer. My journey really started in B2C, traditional branding and strategy, CPG world. Grew up in agencies, working with customers like Colgate-Palmolive, Butterball Turkey, Winchester Ammunition, Walmart, some of those big players. I was actually on the ground at Colgate-Palmolive, so I was sort of living two lives. So I living in New York, living in Cincinnati, and sort of shuttling back and forth. But really, what I liked about that was that foundation of strategy and branding. What is a brand? Who am I? What do I do? Why am I right for you? And that's universal, and that translates everywhere. Did that for many, many years. Never lived and worked in the same city, so that my career has always been a traveling career, which is fun. When you're single, it's great. I get to plant roots everywhere. But after about 15 years in the agency space, the agency shifted focus. I love storytelling, I love puzzle building, but the ownership of the agency really wanted to go in a direction of, I really like the outdoors. I like hunting. I like fishing, and I'm a city boy. I just am. I love being in a city. So was able to find an opportunity to move to B2B. I had a friend working with an organization and said, "Hey, I think you would really like building a marketing team here." And so moved to the client side with a company called Heritage Food Service Group, private equity owned, which is also sort of a through line of my career. Is I've spent a lot of time with private equity. I don't know how that happened, but it's happened. So worked with Heritage to reposition and rebrand that organization, because from a sales perspective, they were the market leader. Competitive pressures dragged them down to where our growth rate was basically non-existent. So in the span of about 5 years, we were able to take that new brand position, take those opportunities, and rebuild our sales structure to a way where we were. I think when we were acquired, we were at about 15% CAGR. So we were able to get it back, which was really nice to see. Which is also why we became an attractive target for acquisition. The company that acquired us, a company called Partstown, they're still the industry leader in parts distribution, which is in the commercial food service space. Was with them for about a year. And my job was specifically to put the two brands together. So take my branding expertise and create a revised story for Partstown, create revised visuals, create those talking points that ensured the customers that were Heritage's that something wasn't going to change. So create that confidence that it was going to be, as my father liked to say, I want my life to be a placid stream. We wanted to create a placid stream for our customers in that transition. So that took about a year. And then the biggest piece of that wasn't so much the brand storytelling. It was, how do you take two giant e-commerce companies and merge them into one? So two companies with, over a million SKUs in their catalogs, some overlapping, some not overlapping, and get those platforms aligned and move that out the door. From there, I landed in commercial HVAC with a company called Greenhead Group. Worked with that organization for about 2 years. So I would shuttle between Cincinnati and Wausau, Wisconsin every other week. Wausau, Wisconsin is in the middle of Wisconsin. It is not an easy place to get to, but I think it was a really good learning experience for my career. They were privately held, so that's the one organization that did not have PE involvement. I think what's interesting about manufacturing organizations from that perspective is, how do they value marketing? What do they feel marketing should be doing for them? And I think one of the rub points, at least as part of my career there, was I believe your brand should own the story that's being told. And it should not be told by a third party, even if that third party is your external sales force. it's still your brand and your story that you should be telling. And was unable, unfortunately, to convince leadership that that's where the world should be positioned and things like that. So through all of that, I got married. Well, technically, we're not married, but it's easier to say married.
Nobody's going to the courthouse to check records. You can say
Yeah,
whatever you want.
yeah. So got married, and she looked at me and said, "It's time for you to come home." And
That's
so,
weird that she wants to actually live with you now that y'all are together. That's
yeah,
bizarre.
I know, and she had 2 children too, so I inherited some teenagers, which is
Nice.
a nice entryway into how do you deal with children. You get them at the fun parts of their lives. But she told me to come home, and I was lucky enough to have a recruiter from Hy-Tek reach out and say, "Hey, we've got a marketing leadership position. We really like your background," because I did have a lot of distribution experience. So I was buying and giving tours of distribution facilities that had automation and robots in it. So I'm like, all right, now I just get to tell the story about how robots and automation can solve challenges. So I've been doing that for almost 2.5 years. Super excited to be at Hy-Tek. There is a huge story to tell. The industry is constantly changing. It's rapidly changing. The introduction of AI, software-driven orchestration, the robotics, which are the flashy side of what we do. I think those are becoming commodities, and I think we'll see that continue to happen over the next several years. But really, my role here is to build a marketing team, position our brand, build a story, connect with customers, drive opportunities with customers, and help close the deal. And so that's also why I also have a bit of a sales hat on, is because I am there to also help try to close the deal.
Right.
So it's been an interesting career. Like I said, private equity has been a big piece of that career, and I might be one of the few that said I really like working with private equity, because at least you know what you're going to get.
Right.
You know what the questions are.
Right.
They're going to ask you about EBITDA. How much does this cost? Why are we doing this? Or how is this going to drop to the bottom line? I think at least you know what you're doing. Privately held, sometimes you've got family politics, you've got executive leader like there's a lot more moving pieces, at least from my perspective, versus a private equity firm. So, for all the PE guys out there, I actually do like working for you. So
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for us. We've brought companies to that level where they've been acquired, and then we were not brought
Thanks
in
for
with
our
that.
service on the way out
Yes,
the door.
yeah. Thank you for getting us here, but we're going to move another direction. So that's not been great, but we've also been hired by private equity firms for their businesses, and that's been very beneficial. So it's two-sided. Some come in and clean house, and they immediately want profit, so they cut everything. And marketing is one of the first things to go, unfortunately. But in some cases they've even come back and said, after time, the people that moved into that, the original ownership, have been like, hey, we kind of want you back because we miss it. They feel the sting of that. But yeah, like I said, it works both ways. But we've enjoyed the relationships we've had, especially with aggressive ones that are bringing on new companies, because once you have that relationship, they're like, hey, can you do this for them? So it works out pretty well.
Well, and that's honestly, that's been my experience with private equity. I know we'll talk a little bit about teams and my love of small, nimble teams internally. One, I look at it and say, if PE comes and they want to start chopping heads, my team is small and nimble, therefore I tend to get left alone. But I've also introduced and created a lot of relationships across agencies and introduced them to the PE firms. So like I have a search firm that I've worked with for, I don't know, 15 years, which I got introduced to by private equity. And I've introduced them into other PE firms, and they do work for those PE firms. I've done the same with some other branding agencies. I've done, I look at the relationships that I've built over time with my agency partners, and I make a point to introduce them. to the PE firm. One, because it creates confidence in what I'm doing, but also provides the private equity firm a level of opportunity to educate themselves on what is marketing, what is branding, how does this get done? Because they're finance people. Odds are they're not going to think about what is branding and what is marketing. And even if they've got a marketing person on their roster, they don't necessarily think about it in those big terms. So I like the interplay of introducing my partners to the PE firms and creating relationships there, because it also helps protect all of us in what we're doing, and it elevates and highlights what we do. So
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk about your lean and nimble team that you have right now. By position, what talents do you have on the team, and how do you leverage them?
Yep. So I have an individual. Her role is primarily lives within the Salesforce platform, both the CRM and I will continue to call it Pardot. But in that side, I've got a digital marketer who's responsible for our email, social programs. I've got a creative lead who is responsible for creating the initial story and then working with partners to help manage the development of that. I've got I actually just had one team member that leave, and she was primarily focused on blog writing and white papers and working with the teams internally to build that. So, from that perspective, I've actually backfilled her with a freelance writer. Again, someone that I've had a long career with, and been able to bring her up to speed. Because that's the other thing I like too, is they know me, they know what I like, we know how to get things done quickly. There's a short language there. So really, I'm three team members. I will probably go back to 5 in the coming months or within a year. And mostly where I want to fill those gaps is bringing back a creative resource from a writing perspective. And then I also want to bring on a sort of mid-level marketing manager so that I can give them a vertical to own, or work with our OEM partners for co-marketing and things like that. Because, unfortunately, where I sit these days, there's only so many hours in the day for me to sort of push through a lot of this stuff.
Right.
I will say AI does help.
Sure.
It does help. But, I think having that human who can interact with those groups makes a lot more sense. So that team will grow. At least it's budgeted to grow in the next cycle.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are thinking about this expansion, and you've got kind of 2 open seats right now, do you plug those with more freelancers, outside agency partners until you bring in? How do you decide when you're going to use an outside agency partner or a full-time employee?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, obviously, it's in conversation with my CFO and just understanding, where do we want to prioritize across the organization. I think, for us, we've got to focus on the development of our software platform. So finding software developers, software engineers, that's a priority. So really, it's prioritized based on some of the goals of the organization. I think too, for me, I am a vibe hirer, so I will talk to people a lot. And really, what it is I'm looking for individuals that want to spend a lot of time together. I don't want it to be, I come in and work from, 9 to 5. I want you to come in early because you're excited to be with your team members, and you're going to hang out late because there's a project due. It really is about creating an internal agency versus creating a marketing department. Now, I think what's interesting is because they're all younger than me, and most of my team to date don't have agency backgrounds, so they haven't done the 3 a.m. projects due the next morning, and you're having a beer and you're doing this and you're all working together and sort of building that resiliency / camaraderie that happens at late hours of the night as you're working on projects. And it's not that I'm saying you guys have to stay here till 3 in the morning. But I want I want my teams to understand that, what we do is really important for what the organization is trying to achieve. And I know there's work-life balance, but I also want you guys to prioritize, what you're responsible for. And I think having that desire to want to be on with your team in those moments makes some of that other decision making for them a lot easier. I also like complementary skill sets, and personality skill sets. So if you've got one that's like super high energy and lower, but they work well together. Like because I've had partnerships like that. I have a friend, colleague, started as a colleague. He's recruited me to places, and I always liked our interplay because I will chase an idea all day. If I think it's cool and exciting, and I can see the thread in my head, I will chase it until I run off a cliff. And he will grab me by the bell loop and say, "Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about this," and before I run off the cliff. And I think that's valuable. I think having sort of a Batman to your Robin in sort of any working relationship is valuable because you learn so much off of each other as you're thinking through how ideas come to life.
Right. Are y'all punking me? I mean, was there an ad to be Michael Russo's new best friend and Erik applied? And then somehow you slipped into my DMs for this? Because
it's true.
It's eerie, Erik. It's freaking me out, man.
Yeah, we definitely come from the same
It's the
background
white
here.
beard.
Yeah.
Well, and the life philosophies and the 3 a.m. sessions to bond the team. And it's not just a job, it's a passionate career. It's all of it.
I don't know about the bonding team part because I don't know if I love that part of my life. But Jack and I both were cut from the same cloth. I mean, early in our careers, it was the grind. It was part of the job, and it wasn't about how much you got paid or what you. It was like, this is my apprenticeship. This is where I'm going to gain that experience. It's just the job, and whatever it took. And now we both kind of, Jackie was in Los Angeles, I was in Seattle at the time. We both moved to our hometown in Louisiana and started the agency, and it's been 25 years. So we've obviously modified our work system, and we wanted something different than that of 24/7 work, but finding a hybrid in it, and I think that with that comes a responsibility, maybe a whole different topic, but it's that inner responsibility of, I want to make sure this is right. I want to put the time in that it takes, whatever time that takes. And I'm going to manage my time with that. I want to give you the freedom to have that time, but you got to want that. And if you don't want that, then it's not going to work out,
Well, I also think to me, it's also like a Gen X thing. Like Gen X, we just always had to figure out how to get it done. Like we may or may not have had parents at home at the time, or whatnot. We just had to figure out how to get it done. If we wanted to go from A to B and there were no parents to be found, how do you get from A to B? You got problem solving skills, whether you wanted problem solving skills as a Gen Xer.
Right. No, for sure. Well, and I do, I don't like the mantra that I hear about, these kids today. I never want to be that person. I found a quote years ago from a great philosopher who talked about, the next generation, doesn't do this and doesn't do this and doesn't do this, and just this laundry list of frustrations. And I was like, oh, it's another one of my colleagues raging against the machine. And it was Aristotle. I was like, oh, so we've been complaining about this for a long time. A long time now. I mean, he's talking about Socrates, right? So for a long time now, people complained about the next guy. So I don't want to be that. And yet I do see a shift. And so I wonder how much of that is our fault because we raised the next generation. And so, how much of that are we going to own? How much of that is them seeing what we went through and thinking, I don't want to live in the Mad Men era. I don't want to work 60, 80 hours a week. I don't want to be up at 3 a.m. Trying to, crush it for a deadline. I have all these tools and technologies now. I can work smarter, better, faster, and fit it all into 40 hours.
But do the shortcuts take away the learning experience of that?
That's the question.
You go straight to it. Like I learned this earlier when I was in college. One of my art teachers talked about Picasso. They were like, Picasso didn't become Picasso overnight. He knew how to draw.
Yeah.
People only see the abstract and they think, well, I can do that. Well, no. That came from something. He was a great artist. I mean, he was a master artist. And then he decided to challenge that and move beyond it. But none of that would have happened if he didn't have the foundation, you know? So
Yep.
foundations are important. You know, I think learning the basics of, you know, brand building and
Yeah.
the grind of that. You talk about storytelling and all those elements. I think we can jump in there now and just type in what is a brand or what is this or what is that, and it gives us an immediate answer versus us figuring it out through the process. And I think that the future art directors, the future creatives, the future writers, the future marketers, I think are all going to come from the people that are really good editors and really good at managing the technology that is emerging. You know, you have to be able to manage it. And if you're just having it do your work for you, well, everybody can do that. But if you can manage
How do you
it,
execute?
Yeah.
yeah,
How do you put it into place?
Well, and I think too, it also, when you talk about brand building, you know, if you're relying on the technology to help you build your brand, I will tell you the Hy-Tek brand, when I interviewed here 2.5 years ago, um, one of the first things I noticed, we have an innovation lab, and really what that is it's a technology discovery center where we have solutions that customers can come, see, touch, feel, see their products perform in. But one of the unique things about the solutions is, if you look at the floor, because of the repetitive nature of the movements of the robots, they create marks on the floor. And I looked at that and I saw that and I said, there's our brand. You know, we're here to connect people to products faster, and we're also here to do it consistently over and over and over again without fail. And technology is not going to give you that. It's not going to give you that opportunity to look at a line on the floor and say, I can build a brand around that. I can build a story around that. I can take that and just run with it and have some fun with it and position us so differently than what the rest of our industry does. We're going to deliver on a promise that's more emotional and not just, I've analyzed your data, here's your design, we'll put the system in.
Right. Right. No, it's always going to be the human discernment coupled with some technology
Yeah.
that I think is going to give you the best results.
Mhm.
So you've been in this industry a long time. You've seen some real shifts in how these pieces are starting to fit together and kind of evolving over time. Tell us about a campaign or an initiative that really taught you something unexpected.
Yeah, I think from an initiative perspective, one of the things that I was challenged by, because I didn't necessarily agree with the thinking, was, as I was putting, you know, the Heritage and Parkstown brand together, you know, was around voice, you know, and tone of voice, and building a campaign to a voice that was foreign to me when I think about the two brands. You know, Heritage, we were very customer service focused, but expert driven. Partstown was way more playful, really casual. And one of the things that I did was I did an A/B test, and I'm like, you know what? We have loyal customers that have been Heritage people. They'll push back on this, and you know, so I built an entire campaign wrapped in the voice that was Partstown and pushed it into Heritage. And I was fully expecting to be, why are you trying to be Partstown? Why are you trying to be this? This is not who you are. Why am I doing this? You know, because there was a lot of tension between those two customer bases. There was an overlap, but a lot of tension. And I found that the Partstown voice really resonated with them. They're like, feels more me than the way Heritage was positioned, you know, going through. And you know, and I'm like, you know, and it was just surprising to me, because I thought I knew our customer. I really did thought I knew our customer. And I think, you know, creating visuals and verbals that align to that was something that I wasn't expecting. to be as successful. I was sort of, I mean, my heart of hearts, I was sort of waiting for it to fail and be like, see, they shouldn't buy us. But, it sort of proved the point that, this is why Parkstown's successful.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think, we talk about that a lot. Earlier, you mentioned, the storytelling and building a brand and knowing who you are and all those elements. At the end of the day, though, I think your consumer, your customer, the audience is going to decide your brand more than you can. All you can do is help point them in the right direction. And you can help influence it, obviously, by telling good stories and by positioning yourself the right way, letting people know how what you do can help them and benefit their lives and what they try to do. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to figure it out. Versus in the olden days, you really mandated what you were and people followed. It doesn't happen that way now. There's too much information out there. There's too much, process on the other side. And so I think what you just described is one of those things like, okay, they're going to figure that out. All I can do is help point them in the right direction,
Yep. No, it was interesting. But on the flip side, I think with Hy-Tek, what I've been hearing over and over again, if you go to a trade show hall, and we just finished one of the industry's largest trade show, it's called Modex in Atlanta. And, the refrain time again was, you could take your brand mark off of this booth and I know exactly who you are. And I'm like, is someone who helped design and build this, and like, thank you. Those are the nicest words I could hear at a trade show ever. Is who I am without my brand mark being there. So so
Let's talk trade shows just for a second. What's your secret sauce? How do you get the most out of your trade show appearances? Obviously, the first thing is really knowing your brand and connecting yourself to it visually and messaging wise. But what else do you do to make a trade show your perfect prospecting playground?
Content. It is. So Modex, like I said, is our largest trade show. And we built a really aggressive content program, from in-booth presentations to multiple video walls to guest speakers, partner highlights. It also helps that, I may have started happy hour a little early on most of the days in the booth. So
Nice.
there's always that opportunity. But it's about content. I think it's no different than what's going to make you stand out in the digital world. If you're building content in a booth and you're promoting those schedules, and you give something for your sales team to reach out to and have a conversation with a prospect, say, hey, we've been talking about this. Come to our booth at 2:00 on Wednesday. The representatives from this OEM is going to be there. We can talk solutions. We can do all of these things. So it really is about creating that aggressive content schedule. And it is not easy. It is a lift. Trade shows in general are not easy, especially if you've got a presence of any sort. For that show, for us, it's a 50 by 50 booth, multi-story, it's all of the stuff.
Fancy.
But what made the show successful was the content that we drove in the booth. And oh, by the way, I get to repurpose that content too. So again, it's just like any content program that you would want to run. You're going to get multiple touch points out of it, be it a blog article or an interview, a media pitch. Oh, you get to have the video that happens after that. And then the other thing that we did was we did a partner booth crawl, where we had one of our solution design leads, so the really nerdy engineers who like to talk about how robots work, lead them through several of our partners to learn more about technology.
Nice.
The response for something like that is, hey, I get a guided tour, which to me was also like bringing our innovation labs to life on the trade show floor.
Right.
And, as much as I would love to broadcast demonstrations from the lab at a trade show Wi-Fi is not reliable enough to be able to do stuff like that. What's the next best thing? All the technology's there. Just take them to the customers,
Right.
So it really is about content, and really is about using that program to separate yourself, because most brands, at least in the B2B space, that is non-CES and all that sort of stuff, it is, I've got a machine that's working, it's picking stuff up. It was like, but really, what are you doing that's outside the norm and outside of the expected, this is a trade show conversation? I would also say too, it's like, think about what trade shows you want to be at. Like we just actually finished a trade show called Automate, which is for automation, robotics, and manufacturing. And we were the only true systems integrator at that trade show. And it's mostly because, they're there thinking about, oh, how do I manufacture something? But they're not thinking about the other side of the house.
Right.
So where you have an opportunity to sort of say, let's complete the story. You're doing this on one side, but you've got to do some other things on the other side. And guess what we can do? We can help you connect those dots.
Right.
We can help you help it all make sense. So that would be the other piece too, as you're thinking about your brand and your story. Where are the gaps that you can fill in that someone else might not be thinking about? So do a SWOT analysis of different trade shows. It's just, don't necessarily always listen to the trade show people trying to sell you things because there's so many of them.
Right.
But do a SWOT analysis of, can you fill a gap? And, and give it a go.
For sure. One of the things that fascinates me is, and I think you're doing a really great job with the content side of it. And so once you get them to come by the booth or connect with them, you're going to land them. It's the people who don't do the pre-work. I'm like, no, you got to set appointments ahead of time. You can't hope that, what is it? They say less than 8% of attendees are going to happen by. Well, I don't want to lose my potential with 92%. I want to drive that up. And so the work done ahead of time to ensure there's an appointment, they're going to come by on Tuesday at 2.
And with that kind of investment,
Right.
You're putting that much money, that needs to be all in on that and the follow through,
Right. Well, that's where I was going. And then, geofencing while you're there and then the follow through after. Now you're enveloping them and making sure that they're really seeing you. So I think that's great.
Well, and I think that's for the sales team in that pre-work, having that content schedule. You're giving them something to talk about that isn't just stop by the booth. This is what we do. Stop by the booth. This is our giveaway. It's stop by the booth and learn something. Your company is sending you to the trade show to learn something, because they've got expectations as well for that investment. Give your sales team those easy components that they don't have to work too hard to get out to their prospects.
Right. No, absolutely. It's too important to not have the ROI to be able to get the most from the experience.
Yeah. And I think too, we're finally, and we're five years later post-COVID, I think we have finally shaken off that from a trade show perspective.
Right.
If I think about the crowds the last year and a half, you're definitely seeing people are back and they missed that piece of an industry and all of that sort of stuff. So I think trade shows will always serve a purpose. I think it's also up to the trade shows to help us realize and connect the dots between the digital and the physical world too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like pre-COVID, the trade show, and this is a pretty broad generalization, but most trade show organizers seemed very like, yeah, whatever we can do to help, we're in this together. Since COVID, it's a lot of, this is my proprietary information. It's going to cost XYZ. And I'm like, you are struggling. You need us more than we need you right now. Let's go back to that friendly, we're all in this together vibe.
Yeah, well, and I think too is like shows, there are no pre-show lists anymore. Like you have no idea who's coming to these things, so you're sort of hunting and pecking. It's like, if we're going to do business and you want me to spend $500,000, $2 million on bringing a team, buying, reserving space and doing all of this, you got to help me sell, and there are some shows that do it better than others.
Right.
I think, there's the development of apps for shows, but they also have to work on getting registrants on the app so that we can start talking to them. If you don't want to publish a list, help us sell something.
Right.
And I think that right now has probably been our biggest challenge around trade shows, around that pre-work. Like, we have last year's booth scans and whatnot, and we can pre-market to them, but do we know they're coming?
Right.
Idea.
I've never understood that though, because the whole idea behind a trade show is that you're bringing everybody in with a communal need.
Yep.
It's to share information, is to make connections, and then you are getting in the way of that by putting up these roadblocks. I've never understood why that's so complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I get the data privacy. People
Yeah.
get a lot of emails. Then find a more creative way to do it.
Mhm.
And like I said, I think there are a few shows out there that have done really well with their apps and allow you to engage and do all that sort of stuff. I think there needs to be more of that from a trade show perspective. But tangent on trade shows.
Well, and I think trade shows are so important to the B2B space that we can't take a chance on it. It's like, come on, people.
No, we can't. It's interesting from that perspective. And I really, like I said, the last one that we were just at, at 2 days of interviewing people, and then 1 day of, all right, they came back for business.
Right.
And it's like, that's great, but I would have loved to have that tripled.
Oh yeah.
I could have probably tripled that with, a stronger outreach program if I knew who was actually going to be there.
Right. Right. No, for sure.
Yep.
So when you think about the people outside of Hy-Tek, how do you feel like they actually perceive the brand? How confident are you that it matches what you intend? How often do you regularly check on that?
So, I mean, on the bright side, we went through repositioning about a year and a half ago. So I've got some fresh research on who we are, what we do, and why people like us. I think the way that I do pulsing is we do NPS. Another one of the things that private equity really likes is consistent outreach into your customer base. I think what's challenging for us is, when do we hit them? Our sales cycle is so long. We're talking 12 to 18 months from first contact to commissioning of a solution. And then you've got another, 3, 6, 12 months to really understand, did we hit the target? Are we optimizing? How are we doing that? And I think, as I look at, and the other way I do it too is I do it by the segment of the business that they engaged with us.
Nice.
So if they were primarily a software customer, I'm really just talking to them about software and getting that perception and things like that. So I think, how our customers see us today, they do see us as a trusted advisor, and that really is our brand position. I think that's becoming harder from a lot of in a lot of ways. And I think one of the ways that's being made harder is that customers are going into AI and saying, here's my throughput, here's my product SKUs, here's this. This is what it tells me I need as a solution.
Right.
And so how do you combat some of that stuff? And so, like, to me, that's where I think AI is eroding some equity. So we have to make some conversation, build some guardrails around, okay, if they want to use AI, then what's our version of that? So that we can rebuild that equity. So I think today we're still very much perceived as that trusted advisor. We've got a core set of customers that are always going to be our champions. You want to find those promoters, nurture those promoters, let them evangelize to the benefits that we deliver as an organization. But it is getting tougher. But yeah, for me, I pulse it through NPS. We also are launching a customer advisory board. So I'm also going to be pulsing it through that customer advisory board, where we have taken a broad swath of our leading enterprise customers and are bringing them together to not talk about Hy-Tek, talk about the industry and help drive and meet their needs. But we'll also have a sense of, are we delivering on what it is we're delivering on from that perspective.
I think it's interesting. When you say you bring in customers, you're talking about competitors, right?
No, we're not bringing competitors.
No, not your competitors, the customers and their competitors. So if you have multiple
Yeah.
customers, they're competitors. So they're
Yeah.
coming together.
Oh yeah. They're all coming together, and
Which is
so
interesting.
we'll get some of that. I think, and I also do a lot of social listening and a lot of just brand tracking from our competitive set perspective as well, just to understand what are they doing, why are they doing it different, did they shift, is there something that I'm seeing from them that is signaling something. I always like to go back to like P&G. You knew when they were about to do a major refresh of a brand or a package. You could see it leak. It would leak in over time, and then all of a sudden you see there were signals. And so I'm always sort of looking for those types of signals in my social listening, just sort of my general observation of our competitive set, because they still do it, whether they mean to do it or not, you sort of see it.
It's easier in the B2C space. So how do you do that in B2B land? Because it's a harder thing.
I am very obsessive about about watching our competitive set. I've also built several AI prompts that I deploy weekly, bi-weekly to monitor what's happening in the marketplace around our customers,
Right.
around our competitors, around technology solutions, just general developments. So I'm sort of always aggregating from that perspective. So that, to me, that's where the one place that I really like AI is that ability to craft a prompt to help me pull that information in and really use that information to predict market and to drive market intelligence. I've also developed some good relationships. We've got a couple industry leaders as far as market intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I've built relationships with them to help stay connected. So you have those bi-monthly calls with them just to get a sense on what they're seeing and how they're seeing it and whatnot. So that's the big way I do it, is really those AI prompts, an obsessive amount of LinkedIn watching. So I follow certain individuals as well because they tend to be very chatty.
Yep.
So I do it that way as much as anything. But the AI prompts have been, I really wish I had those when I was in my agency days.
Oh, trust me, it's delightful.
If I was going to do some brand research, or even what I used to do, I would have, my roster would be about 6 to 7 clients at a time. And I would do a weekly sort of what I see in the marketplace report out to those individual customers. And, say, this is what I see. Here's your opportunity. Do you want to, should we do this? So it's like soft selling, but at the same time, sort of keeping them up to date. Because I think that's the other thing too, in B2C, B2B, and I think it's really in B2B, you really get tunnel vision.
Yes.
You're in your world. You're really paying attention to what your organization is doing, the products that you're making or trying to put out. How do you sort of break down that tunnel and get that for customers? And so that's the other piece that I like AI for is, and I'm working through some new prompts to help build some of that type of research for customers that we can drive into that space.
Well,
Right.
I think what we talked about earlier with, sorry, Jackie, like with editing and being a manager of technology, I think with AI, it's paramount right now, because that fire hose opens up and it's everything. You don't get one thing, you get 20 things. And then it starts to be really clever and saying, hey, if you want, I can do this. If you want, I can do this too. Why not? Oh, that sounds great. Give me that. And pretty soon you have a novel. And now you just needed a prompt, it is overwhelming, and it can be, and if you don't know how to manage that and know when to say no, like, okay, we need to back off a little bit. Let's ask more definitive questions, and let's not let it just agree with us. And all of a sudden now we have a whole nother mantra, and we're taking over a third world country, we didn't even know we were going there. And it became really crazy all of a sudden, so we have to really be able to manage that. And again, just, it can be a lot. It can be a lot.
Yeah.
Technology is great, but it can be a lot.
It is. I mean, what I've what I have found with the prompting, and one of the things, because I want to, I want to maintain the human connection. It's like, it's great. You can aggregate for me, but what I like for a newsletter that I'm working through is I'm going to let the prompt aggregate, point some content in the direction, and then say, all right, here are my SMEs. I need you guys to read this article and answer these 3 questions so that I can take that and create that editorial content that is built on top of the AI prompts and the things that have been aggregated. Because, no one, the trust factor of AI is low. Everybody's fearful of their job. And it's like, sure, it can replace some repetitive tasks, but it's going to hallucinate, or it's going to take its time to figure out what you're really thinking about a particular topic. And I want to make sure that the human connection is always there. So no matter what I do with AI, it's always going to have a human lens that it gets vetted through, because I want people to know that it wasn't written by AI.
Right.
Yeah, and you can, it's starting to, I mean, I can tell pretty much anytime I see something, because the patterns are really obvious, and it's gotten better at that, but its perfection is what makes it obvious sometimes, and
I
it's,
love adjectives.
yeah, it's very, it tends to be very, generic in its base, like it's just normal. It's mediocre. It's like really good mediocre work, like very passable, very good, but there's no sizzle.
Yeah.
There's no, thing to it, magic to it. And that's why I think we still have jobs, for the time being, at least.
Yeah,
We'll see.
you can't feel the excitement out of it.
Yeah,
Like you can tell when someone was excited to write something.
you're right. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm shocked to realize we're about to wrap up, but I wanted to get one more question in before we exit. So as you continue to grow, I mean, Hy-Tek is on a growth spurt right now. Marketing's done a really good job to put it there. What does marketing need to accomplish in the next 12 to 24 months to actually support the trajectory? And where do you feel the most pressure?
Where I feel the most pressure is content and content creation. I think the pivot to answer engines is demanding a amount of content that is a challenge to a nimble team. So when I look at it and say, if I have to grow, I've got to grow there because I need the content.
Right. No, 100%. Like we've gone from, I think in the olden times we were like 1 blog a month, and then it became 2 blogs a month. Now it's 5 articles a week.
Yeah.
Now they're not all front facing because I don't want to overwhelm our subscribers.
More than that, it used to be a campaign a quarter.
Well, yeah.
And now it's a campaign a week, or sometimes a day. I mean, it moves that fast in the cycles,
All right. Take off your sandals and socks and get off the front lawn.
I'm just saying. No, I mean, we're doing it. That's the reality of the world. The demands are higher. People expect more and expect it faster. They expect it to still be good. And you have to meet those expectations. I see the challenges of every marketing director out there. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's the content piece, and that's what scares me are the answer engines,
Right.
and positioning us to be where we need to be for those. I think because then it's not just the demands of the marketing team. I means I got to get the SMEs involved. That means I take time out of their day. I've got to so how do I shortcut it for them,
Right.
so I can also produce the content. So I think. For me, a lot of shorter op-ed videos will probably become a large piece of what we do.
Right.
Because at least I know I can capture somebody in the innovation lab for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and get a quick video. And then, then I can turn that into a piece of written content. But as far as net new, and then the other thing I'm doing as well is, to keep it timely, is how am I scraping trends in the industry? So like right now, I'm scraping biweekly and sort of saying, okay, what am I going to build? What makes the most sense? Is this an email campaign? Is this a blog article? Is this a white paper? Is this a webinar? And sort of taking those trends and ensure that I'm timely in how I get that content out.
I mean, I'm torn between that being incredibly optimistic, because that's how I see it too. And I'm excited about that, because those are things that are helpful for the people who are willing to do the work. They're going to get the reward. And also that makes me tired.
Yeah.
It does, but and we have a lot of clients that have fallen into the thought leadership space, and we've always been a big advocate of that before that term was even used, I think, which was, how do we position our clients as the experts in the room? That's the way we used to talk about it. And we want them to be the ones that are the top of mind to call. Now it's thought leadership, and really that is just, it's possible, but it takes a lot of pre-planning, a lot of commitment from everybody. You can't just call out and say, I want this to happen. Everybody's got to get on board. And we have a large company that we're with now, and it's like herding cats. They're busy. They don't have the time to plug in. It's like, look, I just need an hour. Give me an hour and I'll pull out 20 hours of content. I just need to interview them. Give me half an hour. Give me 20 minutes. But we have to start somewhere, because if I'm making it up on my own or it's not ours anymore. It's got to come from us. It's got to be from the organization,
Well, you want to capture the voice of the subject matter expert, because if you don't capture their voice, then it's just, whether it's human slop or AI slop, it's slop. And so it's their voice that's going to make it work.
Well, and that's who I'm sending to trade shows. That's who I'm sending to put in front of a customer. That's who I'm sending when I do a media pitch. It's like, it's your brand.
Right.
Now I'm going to help you, but it's still your brand.
Right.
So, you've got to think about it in those terms too, which is usually how I position it with them. It's like, you want to be this, you're going to have to actually contribute to make it happen.
Yeah. It's got,
absolutely.
It's got to have soul to it,
Absolutely. All right. I hate to break up the bromance, because I feel like y'all are going to be, BFFs sharing bunk beds. But I do have to honor our time commitment. So Erik, this was awesome. You are awesome. And thank you, because this is exactly what I was hoping for.
Wonderful. No, I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you both. Happy to do it anytime you want. I love talking. So. Oh,
don't say that, because I'm going to be coming back to you on a regular segment now.
Hey, I'm fine with that.
Awesome. And to all of you listening, thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe, and see you next week.
When the day